FBI agent!
If it bleeds, we can kill it.
Say hello to my little friend!
Can you dig it?
We're for part 2 with John Kreng. Hopefully you got the first part and you hear a lot about the history and theory and this great mind that we have in front of us with all his significance and background. But now we're in the exciting part. We're going to talk about the process and his ponytail. No, seriously, we're going to talk about the process.
That's all I got. Everything else is fading.
Is that right? All right, John. So let's just get right into this. Why don't you tell us about your process? I've seen you do it. I know that you work a lot on beats, but why don't you kind of give us a good, well-rounded concept story into how you go about coordinating a fight?
Okay. I get the script, and then I put something cool. Then I'm done. That's it.
All right. Studios love that.
Yeah. Sign my check with the X.
Exactly.
And I put in my account, and then I'm done.
So you, so you're given the script, and depending on the project, you've got the fighters, you bring in the fighters. I mean, obviously these are variables, but why don't you tell us now about your process?
I talked to the producer and the director, and I asked them how they want this fight or this action scene to emotionally come across. How does this action scene serve the story if it's not... certain times I'll see an action scene and it's kind of like a 2-3 sentences, and it doesn't give me that much to work on. What I'll do is I'll ask the producer and director what do they feel they need. Then from that point on, I'll talk to the director and ask him what the emotional content of the scene is supposed to be.
Emotional content?
Yeah.
Oh, it's like I've heard that before.
Yeah. If you look at that scene in Enter the Dragon, that when he teaches that kid, there's a lot of lessons a fight choreographer can learn. Like when he throws that kick, that beautiful kick that just cracked up there.
You want to tell him who he was fighting, by the way?
His name was Stephen Tung Wai, who is now a big stunt coordinator in town. He was also part of the Chinese opera also.
Nice.
So that whole thing is when he throws that kick, it was a beautiful kick. There's no substance behind it. It just looked cool. And then Bruce looked at him and goes, "What was that? An exhibition?" I mean, if you look at it, he goes, we use emotional content. You got to feel, you got to have the audience feel what's going on. Sure. And you got to have that. If it's all cool and there's no emotional content behind it, you're kind of screwed. The audience is going to walk.
That goes for any action, really.
Yeah. And a car chase or gunfight, anything, explosion. If there's just explosion there, just for an explosion,
it's a shell.
Yeah, it's just like, wow, ooh, eye candy. But what are you feeding the audience?
Well, it's kind of like what you're saying about Once We're Warriors. You came out of there with your knees knocking because there's emotional content.
There's a ton of it, yeah.
But so now you start out and you ask the producers what you're going to do, and obviously you have a relationship with the director, or what's going to be the next step for you, John?
I start, if the actor's involved, depending on how much actor involvement is, I start talking to them. I start assessing their skill set, and then I figure out what they can do, what they can't do. When I get start looking for a stunt double, I start essentially drawing out how the action scene is going to look, and then I try to figure out what's the story behind it. What is the purpose behind it? How do we lead up to it? What other story elements that are led up to this are going to be included into this? Like if he's got a limp, if he's got a history of certain things that the character has even before the story started, that there's like a backstory that I can add to this fight or this action sequence. And then I got to figure out, it's like any scene. How does it begin? How does it end? To me personally, I feel like it's got to end when this fight ends. It has to affect the rest of the story, even though there's no action involved. the drama scenes, the scene where they're sitting at a table talking. That action scene has to affect that. It's like, do you ever see An Officer and a Gentleman? There's that scene where they're out in the town and the locals give them a hard time.
Yeah.
And Richard Gere beats him up.
Yeah.
And afterwards they go back to their hotel room and they're expected to just kind of be in bed and kind of romp, and
doesn't go there.
Yeah, it doesn't go there because she's like, that was really cool. Yeah, where'd you learn how to do that? His head's still there. It kind of really screwed him up.
Yeah.
I mean, that is a direct result of how an action scene can affect the rest of the story.
That's a great example.
Yeah. I mean, that's what I try to go for. As far as the whiz bang pop, that has its place. But I try to lay that down first. Then I go for the big stuff on top of that. And I try to make sure that it doesn't take away from the emotional content as best I can.
Right.
Yeah.
So now you've got the actors and you've got your stunt players and you've assessed their skill set. What's going to be the next step for you?
We start rehearsing. We start blocking. I try to get the DP as involved or as early as possible, without to let them know that to figure out how many setups we're gonna need, how much time we're gonna take to get these done within us while staying safe. That's what I try to do, and I try to make sure that everybody that's involved for that scene, when they come up, when we're up, for camera, that everybody's confident that they're on their A game. I don't try to knock anybody down. I don't try to goad anybody to get them to be on their game. I try to, as best I can, to get the most out of them in a positive way, because I don't feel negative reinforcement.
In other words, you're not a yeller screamer.
No. I mean, I've had to do that a couple times in my career, and it was not something I enjoyed doing.
Yeah. I think that's kind of phasing out anyways.
Yeah, I think so. I really do. I just think that's an older way of, reinforcing. But the thing is, you walk away not feeling good about it.
Yeah.
I mean, my goal for this is to have everybody walk home feeling good about what they did, and knowing that what they did, they're able to take care of their, pay their bills and take care of their family because of that, and then feel good about it. So for the next gig comes, when I call them up, they're going to be all happy about it.
Sure.
But sometimes it doesn't work out that way. So
yeah, I mean, that's a great point that you brought up about the idea of having in the DP in while you're working out the blocking, because then obviously it's just a joint effort of getting the right shots for the most amount of impact.
Yeah.
What kind of things have come up with DPs that obviously, I mean, in your book and just in general, what kind of angles work because you've assessed your skill set. You can kind of work that to your advantage, where a DP may be looking at it from a different perspective. How do you get that to work together?
I try to tell them, okay, a lot of times I try to talk to the DPs, find out how they shoot, what their process is. Like, if a lot of DPs who haven't really shot much action, they like to shoot a master. And I tell them, I go, well, 70% of the action is going to be hits, is going to be misses. A miss is when you see air between the fist or the foot and the target. So, and he says, well, we'll just cut into it. I said, okay, how many times are we going to do this? Are we going to do this 10, 15, 20 times? So you get each one right? And he goes, yeah, probably. Well, when we shoot the reverse angles and the different angles, we're probably shooting. It's going to add up, and you're going to have some burnt out actors, and they're not going to be doing it the same way they were at the first take.
That's the point too. I mean, if it's a short fight and it's a short story, you can kind of get away with it. But like you said, all this reverse angles and all of this comes into play. They get burnt out. They may not be conditioned. It might be. We're all in, hour 14.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? All these things kind of come into play.
Exactly. So what I try to do is there's a difference between shooting a master and a long shot. Sometimes people, it's kind of that crossover. It's kind of like that blurry line. I think a lot of times they just do it because that's all they know. And I think a lot of times in film school, you're never taught how to shoot an action scene. You're taught how to shoot dialogue, which is, master,
Almost
then camera right,
static,
camera
too,
left.
yeah.
Yeah. So, and the problem is it doesn't work that way for fight scenes. You gotta get creative. You gotta choose different angles. You gotta go low, you gotta go high. You gotta, get in tight for certain reasons, certain angles, and it kind of defies shooting an action scene and a fight defies what was taught in film school, from my experience. I've had to help some students out on some films, student films, and I would tell that to them, and you could see their brains scrambling, like, this isn't what my professor taught me, and they kind of freak out a little bit. I was like, well...
Yeah, but you're kind of holding their hand, too, and then they get schooled. I mean, this is somebody who's, how many films have you seen? Never mind being a professional fighter. Like, there's thousands and thousands of hours there, and when you say, this is the angle, this is the kick, this is the choreography that I came up with, as opposed to they heard something what the professor said.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah,
it's just, I try to, when I shoot an action scene, I try to get the DP involved before we actually shoot, which sometimes doesn't work because they've got their schedule. But I try to get them in before so I can show them, what works and what doesn't, so we're all in agreement. So we don't waste time when it comes to actually shooting the fight scene, so we don't burn out the actors, because that's when accidents happen, when they start getting burned out. We keep pushing them. Sometimes the DP behind doesn't realize that the actors are burned out, and I'll tell them, I go, look, you got like maybe 2 more before something happens.
Fizzles out.
Yeah, and they go, oh well, we can't do this all day.
No, they don't have that experience of seeing that, and that's a really interesting point. And dealing with veterans versus somebody who's kind of up and coming, like you get the younger people who have a lot of piss and vinegar and they have the skill set, but they may not be looking for the camera. So all of a sudden now you're kind of fighting it a little bit. And I've shot now with a lot of veterans, and it's almost like I almost have to do no work. It's so easy.
Right. Yeah. It was really funny you mentioned that. I worked on David Carradine's last movie. I was coordinator on his last movie before he passed away. This guy, he knows his stuff. He knows his angles. We put together this fight scene, and I'll never forget this. It was a young DP. He was trying to, establish his dominance on the set, and in an aggressive way where we're like, come on, So I remember we're putting together the fight, and he's setting it up, and he's not even looking at it, and and he's trying to be this, auteur, and he goes, all right, here's how it goes, and the guy wasn't paying attention. Carradine, he wasn't listening to me, and I was telling David, I go, he's not listening to me. You gotta help me out here, brother. And he goes, all right. He goes, here's the fight. And he goes, well, wait, I need to figure out the angle. And Carradine goes, if you put the camera right there where he points, he goes, you will find your angle. And I said, thank you. Because that's where I told him to put it. He wouldn't listen to me. So,
obviously I feel for you. And a lot of times I'm at the point though where I actually listen a lot. Like obviously all these years that we've spent with each other, that's been valuable. And a lot of times I've taken my lump, so to speak, of being at the right position, finding and experimenting. It was like a 3 or 4 year experimentation phase. What works, what doesn't work. Yeah. Try other things. Try new things. Who are into play. You have these Circus Soleil type of guys doing a fight sequence versus a parkour doing a fight sequence. They bring different things to the table.
Exactly. Yeah.
And now you're getting into politics, and it will affect the final product. And you're trying to put your stamp on it, but yet there's just bullshit.
Yeah. The whole thing is, I just want this to work. I want the audience to go, wow, that was amazing. And that's all I care about. Really, egos,
And what would Steven Seagal say in that situation?
Is that right?
Yeah, so, the DP would be all over the place. But All right, so now you're starting in the process. You found your angles. By that point, depending on your time, have you been in a position where you've been involved with the editor? Have you ever gotten that situation where, this would be great if this was cut this way? I understand this is kind of a delicate situation, but I'd like to talk to you personally about your own experience, because obviously sometimes you'd be like, what happened there? And then sometimes you'd be like, great, got it.
When I worked on Battle B-Boy, the director and the producer trusted me to the point where I went to the editing room, and the editor showed me his cut, and he was very gracious enough to say, "All right, John, I want to see how you want to cut this. You just tell me where to start, where to stop, where to cut, what to insert, how to speed things up, how to slow things down," and that was a great experience. That was one of a rare experience. However, after that, some of the projects I've worked on, I've been able to go into the editing room and show what I feel works. I just think for me, the way I watch a film, how I learned all this stuff was watching action films without sound.
Sure.
And that's
a good habit to get into.
Yeah.
It's the same thing with cinematography. You don't want to be influenced with other departments.
Yeah, because the sound
design.
The sound really hides a lot.
Yeah.
I remember when I first started learning all this stuff, and I just watched all the fight scenes without sound, and I watched it. It's like, wow, this is a completely different experience.
Sure.
You actually see how the magic works. So, and then sound hides the flaws, certain flaws that you can't get around.
That's an interesting point. Like I've spoken to some big time people now. I won't mention any names, but it's like in their contract now that they get, a cut, they get an edit on, and sometimes there's politics that turns into another level. But it's certainly something that when we're designing the action piece, this is the vision that we have in mind. Just like what you guys were talking about, or what Austin brought up with Rush Hour and then Shanghai Nights. I mean, this is a talented man, and this can kind of delineate in this whole other area. But that's obviously what happened with Furious 7, with Spiro getting his edits and getting his stunt actions in there. It's something that the stunt community has really been pushing for. And, I'm obviously a proponent of seeing how things really are and to make it better, as opposed to getting to the formulaic aspect of it.
Yeah, I think, for us stunt creators, stunt people to move up, you gotta know your shit. You gotta know your angles. You gotta know where to cut. And that helps. That helps when you're on set, especially if you're short for time. Say for example, you've got 10 minutes to shoot this fight, which I had the problem of when I did one of my first Corman movies. I had
10 minutes.
I had 30 minutes total. What happened was I had to choreograph a fight scene between 3 guys. I asked the director, give me a start point and an end point. Anything that needs to be revealed, who lives, who dies. That's all I needed to know. Any other emotions, anything I need to know to fit this. And this was 3 a.m. in the morning. Two of my stunt guys, all the stunt guys were all passed out on my crash pad. And he says, you need to put together right now. You got 30 minutes. I was like, okay. So he goes, we're going to go in 30 minutes. So I woke him up. We put together a fight, and I made sure. I go, well, how many cameras we got? We got 2. I was like, all right. So, and he goes, and you got 10 minutes to shoot this. I said, all right. So we're gonna shoot this as a oneer, and we're gonna have 2 different angles so that you can cut to it.
Oh, so you just kept the camera static and just have it in that position. So you worked the choreography based on where the camera placements were.
Yeah.
Okay, that's good, because I mean, if not, then you can't get too creative. You're just doing what you can. Your tool set.
Yeah. So, and we did it in 2 takes.
Nice.
Yeah. Yeah, these guys, they woke up and they did their stuff, and after we're done, they went back to sleep.
Nice. And that's actually a good point. Like, I mean, obviously when I was starting out, it was, my mistakes as well as their lack of experience, and it takes forever and doesn't necessarily look good. And then now I have like A-list fighters, and it's like it's 2 takes or less. And in some cases, if it's more than 2 takes, that's actually on me. Basically, well, that wasn't quite right what I wanted, or I'm looking for something else, but 2 takes or less, because now they're used to it. They've been yelled at. They know exactly you need to deliver, and if you have your angles right, you're good to go.
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, when I put together a fight, already in my mind, I know how this is gonna cut in my head, and I think about how that works. Now, the whole thing is I need to make sure that works with the DP and see if he's on the same same board as I am, and the editor also. So sometimes what I'll do is when I do the pre-vis, I'll show them, and if they ask me, I'll keep it. But the thing is they go, hey, can I take a look at how you shot and how you cut, so I can kind of replicate it, so they don't have to figure it out themselves. Because when you shoot these action scenes, a lot of times they're not shot in sequence.
No, and that actually brings up another point, something I've done a lot of, and I know that you've done a lot of, and people, the audience, may not know exactly what pre-vis is. Why don't you tell us what pre-vis means to you, and how that helps the director and the producer in saving costs?
All right, what a pre-vis is.
And what's that stand for?
Pre-visualization.
Right.
Do I get an A for that?
Yeah.
Is that right?
Teacher, A plus.
I didn't bring my apple to give to you today.
I brought you my ponytail.
Is that right? So okay, pre-vis is shooting the fight scene and with all the angles, all the cuts, and showing it to the producer and the director and the DP to see if that's what they wanted, if that's what they had in mind also. And it's I mean, so it saves a lot of time when you actually, in principle, it saves so much time. And if they want to do it that way, you already have your shot list down. You know exactly what needs to be done, so you don't burn out your actors. Nobody gets hurt. Everybody knows their role. They come in and they do it. So I mean, you can get a fight scene done much quicker than figuring out what shots you need while you're shooting, which some shots that I've had to do. And the thing is, in my mind, while they're doing it, I got it in my mind. I'm thinking, all right, they need this, this, and this. They need an insert. They need an emotion here. They need of this emotion. They need this to tell the story. In my mind, I'm watching their backs. It's like, you need these 4 shots. If you don't have a fight. So all this stuff, when they decide to go by the fly, goes, I need to figure out my angles right now, and while they're actually doing it. When I don't have a pre-vis, I have to, in my mind, pre-visit while we're actually doing it.
No, that just shows a sign of experience there. I mean, even myself, when I've been given like pre-vis like shot lists, some of them are like give you like, they've got this a close up, and then they have the angle, they have the aperture, and I'm like, wait a second, there's still a fight that needs to occur here. There's like some missing elements, and as you know, sometimes you're just giving and the script is and they fight. Yeah. And that's now you have to look earlier in the script and develop this based on that. Yeah. Obviously, pre-vis sometimes can be a delicate situation, but I think now we've kind of grown with it, and if at least there's some like feedback with each other, you can kind of work itself out.
Yeah, there's definitely communication because of that aspect. There's now communication of how fights are put together. Before that, you gotta kind of have to.
No, it's kind of like with the DP, the arrogant or auteur DP that's not aware about his fighting. His filming skills and technical skills might be spot on, but there's still the element of the fight, and it's just all those years of experience. I mean, watching these guys operate, they have these different MOs, modus operandi on how they approach it, and everyone has a little bit of a different angle. I mean, I've seen you now work at it a few times, working your beats, and come in with a story. Yeah. I've seen people that don't know what they're doing, and then I've seen guys like Garrett who are like super fast. It's like, okay, the actor comes in here, and then you got a stunt guy here, and they go, bang, okay, now I'm really I mean, these guys work so fast. Right. It's incredible. It's a whirlwind. Yeah. But it's just all those years of experience. Again, Garrett has a background of being a fighter as well.
Yeah, I think, working in this industry, all your experiences previously to this, you bring it with you. I mean, I feel my difference is I have my screenwriting background and then also my art background on top of my martial arts.
Yeah.
So I bring in that differently. I mean, I understand composition probably much better than a lot. How a certain angle can bring an emotion, and how a color scheme on that scene can add a different emotion to the fight. Stuff like that.
Sure. No, that's actually, you bring up a good point here. And the idea is that people, you can go to film school and you can follow what, your mentors say, but ultimately you need to bring in your own individual experiences.
No, yeah.
And whatever those are, good or bad, bring them to the table to make it exciting, because you have to put your stamp on it. And you can show your individuality and your beingness and all that kind of stuff. And because the politics can kind of take your soul away, and you need to bring that back in. And a lot of times it's like, fuck it, you got to do it. You follow the instructions, you follow what they need, but you can still put your own stamp in there.
Yeah, you have to. I mean, how are you going to survive, really, unless
you're cookie cutter?
Yeah, I mean, if that's what feel like you're meant to do, then good luck, have fun.
Be a monkey.
Yeah, be a monkey. I mean, it's just, I just can't. I mean, I guess I'm too much of a rebel to kind of...
You're a rebel.
Yeah, to kind of
do that. You got a ponytail. I mean,
yeah, well, it's is that right?
One of our audience is going to get sick of it. Obviously, we're not. We're enjoying it. But so now we have an idea about your process. We talked in part one, and if you haven't heard part one, folks, I would suggest it, because John gets into the theory and how it's progressed over the last 50 or 60 years. But you look at the way how these guys were starting Wu Ping's father in the 1950s to where we're at right now, editing frame rates, the 6K, 8K will be at 24K in no time.
Yeah.
It'll be all done on gold. No, I'm kidding, folks. Where's the future on this? So now... And it has to be exciting, and trying to make it bigger, better, faster. Can we go further? Can we have Tony Jaa do 17 kicks and 6 flips all in one shot and be blown away, or do we have superheroes and?
I don't know. I'll be honest with you. For me, you got to be emotionally involved.
Yeah.
17, 18 kicks. Who's counting?
Critics.
But the thing is this.
Last guy did 16 kicks.
Yeah.
What a wuss.
But how's it going to affect the audience?
Yeah.
How's it going to affect the audience? Are you going to make them... Look, I grew up in the Grindhouse era where people were yelling at the screen.
Yeah.
Just like, oh my God.
Nice.
If you look at what Bruce Lee did, if you look at what he did, it was very, very simple.
Yeah.
But he was emotionally behind it.
Yeah.
He was committed to that character and what that character was doing.
Sure.
What about some of these newer actors that it's all about the technique, that they're too reserved. You gotta have something, you gotta emote, you gotta bring something to the screen, and also you gotta have a story. It's gotta be a reason behind it. If it's not, then it's gonna be forgotten. Why spend all this time working on a project that is cool but not emotionally satisfying, because people are going to forget it. It's just like, wow, looks really cool, but they're going to forget about it. It's like anything in this world.
Yeah, I agree with that. There was a fight that we talked about a while back, and it was on, what was The Last Born?
The one with Jeremy Renner?
No, the Matt Damon.
Oh, okay.
The fight sequence with Daesh in Morocco.
Oh, okay.
We talked about that fight, and you told me the story behind what was going on, and that what this fellow was doing, hustling on the set, and he had his own guys, and this is probably the only time that I wouldn't say that I disagreed. I had my own point of view on that, and I'm not trying to challenge you on that. It was more or less, in that particular time, based on the character of Jason Bourne, these guys are trained assassins. And my point of view on this was that they're a trained assassin. You can't have emotion because that emotion will hold you back. You can't have it. It's kind of like we were tied into part 1.
Okay. Yeah, I see what you're saying.
So when Desh came into there, he didn't have that emotional content that you talk about a lot. And I was kind of okay with it because he's also an assassin, but I can kind of see that, that stuff does hurt sometimes, but it wasn't conveying in the way that they shot it. Correct me if I'm wrong, that they used some Kali and some Krav Maga and that fight sequence. And to me, it was very exciting. And the way they shot it in the room, it was very unique. Maybe you can kind of elaborate on that. Because to me, what you just mentioned a minute or two ago, being memorable. It was memorable for me. Maybe it's not memorable for you.
Well, I think it's different for everybody. I mean, we have to agree to disagree. I mean, that's okay. I mean, I'm not right with everything, but I know what I feel I need to have with an action scene. I know what you're saying. He's not supposed to show an emotion. He's an assassin. However, you're telling a narrative. You're telling a nonverbal narrative. There's got to be something, even if it's not with an emotion, it's got to be done with the technique and the reaction to it. And it wasn't done that. That wasn't done. It was a demo essentially.
Okay.
So that's my take on it.
No, it could be valid. I mean, I'm not going to have the same experience as you. I'll look at it from maybe a story point of view, a cinematography point of view, or directing, but there's not 20 years or 30 years of fighting experience that you have that I don't have. So, all of these elements, that's probably what, this ties into, how some things can kind of rub us the right way or the wrong way. It's funny how you said that about how people react. And when I saw that old film Up in Chinatown, the audience was filled with like 7 different generations. And there was this older couple, and they had to be in their 80s, right? Uh-huh. And they had their hat backwards. And every time the bad guy did something, they were like, oh. Like in disgust, how dare you do that? And it was kind of entertaining because they were engaged into that film, and that film was, at that time, 40 plus years old.
This is Come Drink With Me?
What's the other one? It was, that's the one with Pepe, right?
Yeah.
No, it was the other one, and with the guy with the red, where Quentin uses that film with the sound effects from Kill Bill, where his arm turns red.
Oh, Five Fingers of Death.
That's what it was. Five Fingers of Death.
Yeah.
So every time the bad guy came on screen or did something, it was like, oh. I literally was probably the only white dude in there. It was quite entertaining. But, there was a content that was part of their culture, and they had the reactions. And like I said, there was different generations. The guy that came up there says, oh, Bruce Lee used to fight outside here, and all these other buddies, cronies were there when they were. So there was a lot of like culture, and it was a great experience as a filmmaker hearing it and seeing, because that kind of reaction, they might go to like Company C and have Spielberg and engineer right there, and I don't like that edit. Yeah. No, these are the audience members.
Right, yeah, because that's all that matters. If you really, when it all boils down to it, it's this audience satisfaction. You could talk about box office, you could talk about how many millions that movie made, but it's about emotional satisfaction of the audience. Did they walk away? How did it change the audience when they walked away watching that movie? I mean, I know the director that directed that movie because I interviewed him for the special features for the DVD that was released here in the States, and we had a long talk about that. And he talked about, if you look at it, that movie still stands to this day because of how that movie was edited. It peaked. Every time he cut, it was from a peak. It never went down. It went up, 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 explode, relax. I mean, it was really, really groundbreaking at that time.
Sure.
And to this day, when you watch that movie, it still stands. Yeah. I mean, it's still a fun movie to watch.
I was thoroughly entertained, and part of it was the audience participation. Obviously, we sit at home, and it's like, you're checking out your texting, and it's not the same experience as an old theater. And the sound effects, and by today's standards, sounds kind of corny, or say it's dated, but it's what it was, and you enjoyed it. I mean, now with the El Rey Network and these Quentin and Robert Rodriguez bringing these old movies. Like for me, I kind of grew up with Clint and Chuck Norris and all these other things. So I have my own influences and whatnot, but you just can't disregard those experiences.
Yeah. I mean, I saw that movie so many times in the theater growing up, and from a martial artist point of view, the lead wasn't that strong. If you look at it, he was very broad. He didn't commit physically with his hips and his shoulders to the technique.
Enough.
Yeah, it was very light.
Was it?
But the thing was, I mean, he was committed to it. Emotionally, he was committed to it. Physically, he wasn't, because you got to look at how that all happened. I mean, when Bruce Lee came in, when he committed to those techniques, he was committed. He was ready to jump off that cliff with that technique. Whereas before, it wasn't like that. It was very reserved. And when he came in, it was just, he just went over the top.
And that's as a kid, you watch it and go, man, that's just some seriously cool shit. Because it is commitment. Like when he does the nunchucks and he's kicking ass, it doesn't matter. He's just, your eyes will gravitate towards that. And that's
Well, let me just add this one thing.
Sure.
If you watch how people, when they use nunchucks in the movies after Bruce, because the first thing you think is Bruce, like, well, that's an iconic thing that Bruce Lee had. Now, if you look at what these people are doing after Bruce, they're just twirling it. It's like, isn't this cool?
There's an aesthetic to that, but I get what you're saying.
There's no emotion behind it. When Bruce twirled that, it was just like there was a connection to his eyes, his body, to that camera or to that person that was challenging him. It was a connection, and the camera caught that.
Yeah.
Whereas with other performers, they weren't able to do that. They're going, this is cool. This is the cool scene.
Yeah.
And that's what they project.
Right.
This is the cool scene. No. You gotta kind of be somewhat a method actor about it and go, hey, I'm twirling this because this is you're gonna go down. This is a sampling of the ass whooping you're gonna get. So I mean, it's just and another scene is when he crushes O'Hara's chest or his head.
Right.
I mean,
and look where the camera is.
It was an extreme.
You have that, and then it's like,
it was an extreme close-up. I mean, but if you look at what it is, there's this complex emotion that he was going through. Like, I got revenge on my sister's death. This man deserved it, but oh my God, I just killed somebody. I'm a Shaolin monk. I defied all these things that are, there's a certain regret. Exactly. And I've seen so many martial arts actors that tried to do that scene and couldn't. And you're just like, because they were trying to copy, or they weren't thinking about the correct emotion for that scene. They weren't in the moment with it. They were thinking, this is the cool scene. This is the scene where I do this, and this. No, you can't be that analytical about it. You gotta do what you can to jump into that scene and make it live.
This is, I think we could delve into this. We could go off on this for a couple hours, you and I alone. Unfortunately, or fortunately, we have audience here.
Is that right?
Yeah. And, I was going to say about the future of filmmaking, I think you kind of answered the question. And it's like, we look at now with, what's happening overseas with the Raid 2 and the Ombak series. When I saw these movies, I'm like, wow, this is some really cool stuff. And like, especially On Back 2, I was blown away. I did not see that coming. Now, is there a bit of show? Yes, but that whole filmmaking process, obviously you got really bad wigs in those movies, but you can kind of see over that. But, especially On Back 2 and what they did in the Raid 2, where as a filmmaker, what I saw was something kind of unique. Like, this guy had some influences from Hitchcock. Yeah. It can get into more gore. Yeah. You have some creativity. There's a parkour aspect, like you being really efficient with the space.
Right.
And I thought this is very clever. And there's no way that this... I shouldn't say no way. It'd be hard for this to actually occur in the States, I think. Just based on social mechanisms, putting it together, and everybody was in sync.
Yeah, that's the key word. Everybody was in sync. Everybody had the same vision. Yeah, it's unfortunately in this business in the West, everybody's got their own vision.
Or it comes in the world of vision, but actually the word might be agenda.
Yeah. Or it could be, this is this department's vision. It'd be nice to see a project where everybody was on the same page. That rarely happens.
And when it does, you pick up on it.
Yeah.
I mean, not even necessarily talking about an action movie, but you watch like these movies like Predator or Shawshank Redemption. It's like you leave that theater thinking, man, that was just a great hour and a half or 2 hour experience.
Yeah.
When all 8 cylinders are firing.
Yeah, I mean, McTiernan, when he did Predator and Die Hard, man, he was on. He was the shit, man. I mean, this is I mean, he knew he had total control over it. Everybody was on the same page.
Yeah.
Jan de Bont with the camera work. I mean, his camera work didn't call attention to himself.
Yeah.
It was like, hey, isn't this cool? Look at this camera whip. Wow, isn't this cool? Yeah. It's just it was a part of the story. Sure. It was all, everybody was in sync with it. That's what I really loved about Predator and Die Hard.
I mean, they're iconic films. I mean, I think most people in the stunt community felt that Die Hard was sort of changed things after that point on. It just like the action genre just went to another level. Yeah. Now I don't know exactly where we're at right now. I think that I just don't really know where we're at. I guess we're in this creative phase with the superheroes and whatnot.
Yeah.
And that's been going on now for 3 to 5 years, and the studios are behind us. There's a lot of money involved in merchandising, and I mean, it's a big animal, but I can't necessarily say that what's going to happen in 5 or 10 years now.
I think it's going to die out. I think it's in trends. Everybody's got their trends, and it's eventually going to see its day. I mean, because people get tired of it, because the thing is, studios are trying to top each other instead of worry about creative content, emotional creative. I just think sometimes it's kind of senseless. There's one of the comic book movies I was watching, I was like going, what was that about? It's just these guys in costumes talking like junior high schoolers and fighting. I'm like, okay,
that's
all right,
bro.
Yeah. I was like, okay, let's. There was no. I didn't feel there was anything you could take away with it. It's like eating fast food. It's like, okay, my stomach's full. I'm ready. Let's go. As opposed
that's
to
quite the analogy, and I actually can't argue that. I think that I discussed before about the idea when the end of Avengers, and I'm not taking away, it was actually a good movie. I was entertained with it. It was just a kind of a bit of a reality adjustment where you got all these superheroes and buildings are being crushed, and then Samuel Jackson firing his pistol.
Yeah.
Whereas in 40 years prior, you have Dirty Harry with his pistol, and that movie was, he's pulling out his gun. Yeah. Now he means business.
Yeah.
But it's kind of like redundant now when these other superheroes have the skills. So the sense of reality is changing.
Oh, yeah.
And the sense of sensibilities are changing. I think it actually changed with the Bourne series, where the shaky cam and the quit edits,
right.
Things started changing after that point. I mean, you can have it again with Crouching Tiger and Hidden Dragon with the wire work and whatnot.
Sure. So. I mean, video games has a lot to do with it, too.
Absolutely.
I mean, we're desensitized if you really think about it.
Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, this was one of the funniest things I remember watching Rush Hour 3 when they were in Paris and they're in the back of the cab and the cab driver had a gun because Jackie and Chris Tucker were behind. He goes, well, you're Americans, so you guys kill everybody, because that's what they think, because they watch the movies and they see the news, and it's kind of, we are desensitized if you think about it. Yeah. That's just part of what's happening with this culture. And when you, like you said, you point out when Clint Eastwood took out his gun back in the Dirty Harry, he meant business, whereas now he takes out it doesn't mean anything.
It's like, yo.
Yeah, it doesn't mean anything anymore.
Yeah. I think that, when it's funny, the other day I was telling Austin that I watched Le Samurai. And
Jean-Pierre Melville?
Yeah. And that was one of John Fluen's influences.
Oh, yeah.
And I was like, this movie was so stylized. I mean, and by today's standards, the pacing's a little bit off, but it still holds up, and it was very stylized. And then you got John Woo, and then now we look at it like us as being filmmakers or directors. Yes. We're going to take some of those influences, but it's more or less you can take this to whatever direction you want. Now that I've been spending time with producers the last year and a half, I certainly think a lot differently now, because obviously they can dictate a lot of the money pools and what have you, and then how you can hide money, but we won't talk about that right now. But in terms of the filmmaking process, in some respects, we have to follow script. There's the individuality about it. And I would even say, I'm going to use the word right now, and I might be shamed in this.
Is that right?
Is the idea of almost responsibility. Okay. I'm going to use that word responsibility. Just even Scorsese said it, a year or so ago, where he's talking about where people don't really know what's real anymore.
Yeah.
And if we give them the true realism, I think people can kind of get off on it. But you talk about the gaming business, and so things are changing. We're in definitely a transitional period. And Oculus Rift is possibly around the corner. I met up with a producer on Friday, and she could actually back up why she liked it.
That's fine.
As opposed to hearing just hype.
Yeah.
I'm not a guy that just buys on hype, because it's just now you're just following a trend as opposed to making your own.
You know what bothers me a lot of times is...
What bothers you?
Okay, here's what happens. Same example.
You need to slam the table.
Damn it. Okay.
But
damn it, this is what bothers me. Right. This is the damn it, this is what bothers me section of this podcast. It's like...
Are you listening?
Is that right? Okay, so here's what happens. You ever talk to somebody...
Is everybody in?
You ever talk to somebody, a filmmaker or somebody, when they want something in the movie, and you say, well, why do you want it? He goes, well, this movie did it, and it made a lot of money.
Yeah.
I was like, really?
That's it.
Is that right?
Yeah, that's because of the politics aspect. I think that also is built on relationships. If we're in a situation, it's kind of like me telling you about fights. I mean, I learn a lot from you. I read, your book and my own experiences, but I can only say so much. But I might have other things that come into play. Now you're going to meet some producers, and they're holding the cards and the influences. So now you kind of know better when to open up your mouth and when to keep your mouth shut. Even working with some stunt guys, some big-time stunt guys, there was a time in the past where I opened up my mouth and I kind of look at it going, I should have just kept my mouth shut.
I think
we won't mention any names, but...
we've all done that at some point. You know?
It's like, just shut up and just follow what you need to do and execute. But yeah, so if you had your druthers, how would you go about doing it, John?
Doing about what?
Like filmmaking process. You've got the money lined up. You're directing. How would you go about doing it differently that maybe somebody else would be doing it? Or the current norm of making it formulaic?
Formulaic, you mean?
Formulaic.
I think, for me, it's always been storytelling.
Okay.
Telling a solid story that's remembered. I'm not saying doing something that's never been done before, because there's no such thing as a new story.
Right.
It's making it, finding that truth and executing it and making sure that your crew believes in it, and they'll execute it along with you. They will help you find that vision.
Sure.
I'm moving into a lot more second unit directing and more directing some of my own stuff, and that is what I have to do. I gotta tell these stories. It's not because I want to, it's because I need to. That's I think that's more important. I need to tell these stories. These stories need to be told. It needs to affect people in whatever way the story is supposed to be done.
I think when I use the word responsibility, you can almost use that, like what you just said. I can almost describe it. We obviously use a different, it could be semantics here right now, but I think it's along the same lines of what you're saying is what I'm saying. Like, you want to tell that story in a certain way. I mean, there was an article that came out with a director that did True Detective. Have you seen the series?
Not yet, no.
Fantastic. I mean, the writing was so well done, and it was executed, and everyone was firing on all 8 cylinders, and it was just like, it's a great story. The writing was phenomenal, and that's probably something we can kind of start to the latter part here, how the writing in action. That's something that doesn't really come up in conversation too much, but if I look at the writing, I look at True Detective, and I look at the Bourne series with Robert Ludlum doing the writing on this, and then it translated well in the movie because there's an ebb and flow.
Yeah.
Some movies it's all action, and then I'm tired.
Yeah.
But you want to you're moving forward,
Exactly.
and then you're back, moving forward, back. You
Yeah.
know, and I think that the writing should be considered here big time. Again, we're talking about having all this cool action shit, and that's great, but it has to tie into the story.
That's always been my number one thing. Always making sure the action supports the story, and the story supports the action.
Yeah.
A lot of times you watch a movie, the action scenes are so disjointed from the story, and you go, "What was that about?" It's like I watched two different movies, and everybody needs to be on page. Stunt coordinators, the stunt performers, they need to be performers. They need to be actors in a way where they are conveying that emotion.
Sure.
And same thing with the editor. The editor needs to remember they're telling a story, instead of like, "Hey, isn't this a cool cut?" You didn't know what that technique or what that thing was. But the thing that bothers me about getting too tight and doing the real fast edits is that you're robbing the audience away of an emotional elation. That's what really bothers me about the way they're doing all that stuff. And also, you're if you're the DP and you're getting too tight, there are reasons why you do it, because one, the actor is not able to do it, and you get tight, so you hide it. That's
one. I think we were talking about this once when we saw Grandmaster. I mean, it was beautifully shot. We all know who the you want to tell who the choreographer was, fight coordinator?
It was Yun Wu Ping.
Okay, so he kind of knows a couple of tricks.
Yeah.
And I couldn't put my finger on it, and I remember you saying, it's because Tony Leung doesn't know how to fight.
Yeah.
So they had to hide the fight because he didn't know how to fight.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, you got a good double. I mean, sure, he trained him for certain sequences. I mean, I saw the movie. There are certain sequences where you saw him do things, but most of the time, if you didn't see his face, you knew it was a double.
Right.
But the thing is was the relation robbed? Was the emotional elation robbed? No, not really.
No, because I was still I was satisfied.
You saw the action.
Right.
And the action was tied into the story. That's, of course, there's going to be a lot of times you can't see, you're not going to see the actor's face. You got to get a double that's going to be able to perform it. You got to see it. You got to see it cinematically and editorially. You can't rob the audience of the emotion by cutting real quick to create a simulated emotion. You're not going to get a rise from the audience if you cut to create that kinetic mayhem. That's not going to work. Yeah, it's going to feel that way, but emotionally, in their mind, they're going, "Oh wow, that's how that's supposed to be." But in their hearts, and the heart's not going to feel that. Their emotion's not going to feel that.
Interesting.
It's.
I mean, it's kind of funny. I can see both points of view here. I can, and I'm not disagreeing with it at all. There's filmmaking, and Kubrick talks a lot about like the editing is one of the things that's very unique to the filming process.
Oh yeah.
And then, like, to me, I do enjoy the Bourne series. I mean, is there an emotional connection? I think so, but like a lot of stunt coordinators kind of feel the same way, is that they didn't get to see the stunt because the edit sort of made it was a bit of a blur.
Yeah.
Now that I've directed and I'm editing as well, I can see those little insert shots, and it was a very unique process. But now, again, it's kind of like the show. Now you're showing the quick edits, but now there's no story there, and there's no more action anymore. We've just missed it just with some quick edits.
Yeah. You're robbing. Okay, let's put this in a situation. Okay, you're watching LeBron James. He's
got a couple moves.
Yeah, he's got a couple moves. What would happen if the camera just zeroed in on his knees or his elbows or his shoulder, and he did this incredible moment that will never ever be duplicated ever again, even by his standards.
Yeah.
And you just focus in on his elbows, and you hear the audience go, "Whoa! Oh my God!" You hear the audience go, you hear the announcer go, "That was the most incredible moment. It's oh my God! Let's see that again." And all you see is the elbow or just his head. Yeah.
Well, actually, just to tie it into the basketball, I mean, what about Jordan when he jumped from the 3-point line? That shot is iconic now.
Exactly.
You can't forget it.
Yeah. What would happen if you just focus on his Air Jordans? You don't have a point of reference.
Yeah.
It's just like, isn't that cool? Look at that. No, it's just no. You're trying to create a false emotion. That's what it is. And the thing is, visually, I understand why you do it, but emotionally, it doesn't work for the audience.
Very cool. I guess this would be sort of like the last thing here. If you look at other people's styles, like Jeff Amata, J.J. Perry, their process and the result on the screen, Wu Ping, is there other guys that you see that are kind of coming up the ranks that are very unique at what they're doing? Like when I've seen now Jeff Amata stuff, I can't always recognize his work. I can with J.J. Perry. Are there other guys that are coming up the ranks here now that are kind of unique in their process?
There's always somebody coming up. There's always people coming up.
Is there a guy that stands out?
There's some unique people. The guys are doing the raid. They've already arrived and people are already copying them.
Very arrived and already copying. I like that.
Yeah, they've arrived. The thing is, I just hope they continue to evolve where they're at and be involved with more of a storytelling with their action. I see that happening.
As opposed to just with the action. I hope even myself, I've spoken to John many times. We've worked with each other, read his book. I'm still learning from John here. So I hope that you guys have, again, his book is Fight Choreography, The Art of Nonverbal Dialogue. I cannot stress enough insightful things in there. You will look at fighting completely different after the first 10 or 15 pages. I'll tell you that much. And there just happens to be an additional 485 pages. So you're in for a treat. If you can sit down and actually read a book. I know it's kind of old school now, but again, John, I want to thank you for your time and your insight and your wealth of knowledge.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Thanks, man.
Steven Seagal would say.
It's an honor, and I thank you for asking me to be here and being your first guest here. That means a lot. That means a lot to me, really, really.
You're welcome, and I'm glad to have you. It was an honor as well. Thanks, John.
Hey!